one of the, as you rightly put, misconceptions, because many fear this sort of supremacy of the machine over the human beings, and at some point in time, there will be a moment when we are going to be overrun and overruled by machines. That I would put it up there as the number one misconception. And why is it a misconception? Because at least I don't think that technically we are anywhere close to that moment yet. I know that there have been speculations and rumors and news that there is some sort of a self-aware algorithm out there produced by one company or another, but I don't think technically we're there yet, at least not from the evidence that I've seen so far. And number two, because it would mean that we would be slipping in our jobs in a way. And I'm not only referring to us as regulators, but overall as, let's say, humankind, that we would be allowing this to happen without us doing anything about it. In other words, putting and doing what we're actually doing right now, which is debating about the ethics of this technology, about how we will be writing rules about the use of this technology. So again, it would mean that we would do nothing of this until the moment when technically that would be something that would be achievable in the first place. So that's why I think this is a misconception. We have a big debate right now, politically and quite ideological, as to how do you actually come about preparing standards, who would be the ones, the one entity and the one group of professionals that would be best placed to actually determine what a standard on ethics of AI looks like. And generally, as I said at the beginning, how do you measure, for example, bias, which is one of the big concerns about the potential impact of AI, that it accelerates biases that already are intrinsic in our society. So again, all of these elements that would be the building blocks for our efforts to regulate from an ethical point of view, to regulate AI, is something that, at least again, egoistically for me as the rapporteur for this text, is a very important question. But of course, depending on who you ask, the key concerns revolve around social scoring and AI used to put people socially in little boxes based on their past behaviors or characteristics that are being inferred by an algorithm. Others are afraid of AI that is used to moderate content in online debates and so on and so forth. So again, these ethical elements in general, I would say, are the ones that are dominating, I would say legitimately, the debate on AI these days. What are the uses of AI that are considered to be, for example, so detrimental to the functioning of our societies and to our values that they are simply not to be at all accepted on our market? So we are going to talk about prohibited uses of AI. And then what are those applications of AI, those use cases of AI that are so again risky for our human rights and human interests, that they need to be accompanied by very strong rules of transparency, accountability, explainability, transparent publicity, so that again it compensates the potential risk that they can bring about. So that's why I think again that regulation right now, on top of the existing self-compliance mechanisms and principles, are both necessary and timely. Very important, because AI is still an area which needs a lot of research. There's a lot of elements that we don't know. Even those that are working, like coding AI, often say that they can't explain fully how an algorithm arrives at some of the outcomes that it arrives. They know the data that they put in the algorithm, they know the instructions that they are provided the algorithm, they know the fundamentals of how they have built that code, but they can't always explain all the way to the end why is it that the algorithm takes certain turns to arrive to certain outcomes. So again, I think that the academia can help and can work alongside the industry to then provide as much clarity, as many answers as the society needs when it comes to this technology in order to enforce that element of trustworthiness that I think is so fundamental for the uptake of this technology. Because ultimately, we have to understand that we have an interest to encourage the uptake of AI. Yes, it brings about risks, but ultimately it is the main driver for the economy of today and tomorrow, and therefore we need to embrace it, we need to learn how to use it, and therefore we also need to sell it to make it as understandable and as palatable to our societies, so that the society is encouraged to use those products and those services that are driven by AI. But for that to happen, the society, the individuals need to understand, they need to trust it. And I think this is where academia plays a very important role. And when it comes to governance, you can't rely on this important role of the academia, just as you cannot rely on an important role of civil society to bring in the reality of the impact and the uses of AI without giving them a seat at the table of where the decisions are made. This is why, at least I personally am pushing very strongly for revised governance in the draft text of the AI regulation, a governance where academia, civil society, trade union, so all those that actually have an important say in the implementation of AI that need to be, again, right there represented at the governance level, so that the decision makers make decisions that are as well informed as possible. And also because this regulation that we're adopting is meant to be adaptable, is meant to be future-proof. And I think that if that adaptability is to make sense, it needs to rely on information, on, again, a reality check, as I mentioned earlier, that comes from those that are constantly interacting with the realities of AI. And that is academia, those that are doing research and development. It is also industry, so industry needs to have a role at the table as well, civil society, so on and so forth. So again, this sort of mechanism and of permanent consultation and having those that matter, the important stakeholders at the table of where the decisions are made and where recommendations for future adaptations of the regulations are made, is crucial for the success of the implementation, the rollout of this important piece of regulation. We Europeans like to say that the Brussels effect is unstoppable, and that the moment we adopt a piece of legislation that caters for the European market, that our market is so important for other companies at the global stage that they will have to somewhat adapt their market behavior, to adapt their products, to adapt their services to this legislation. And by doing so, it would also be a model for how they actually roll their products and their services out to other markets around the world. And GDPR is often used as an example. We have adopted GDPR. We were the first ones to adopt that sort of a horizontal data protection legislation, and then it did become a model for many other corners of the world. I always say that when it comes to these other pieces of digital regulation that we have adopted or that we are working on right now in the EU, we have to be less arrogant about the Brussels effect. Not because I don't think that it can be a model for many other like-minded democracies around the world, because I think it can be a model for others to follow. But I think that we should not simply count on that without engaging in what I call AI diplomacy at the same time. So we need a conscious and proactive effort to reach out to all those other democracies around the world that understand the role of technology in the same way, that understand how technology needs to be constantly driven by values that are underpinning our societies. So those that understand technology in this way, like we do, we need to reach out and have a very thorough conversation with them about the model of rules, about the standards that we'll be following those rules even if in terms of the norms, in terms of the legislation, we would each choose different models. And we also have to respect and accept the fact that different jurisdictions will have different rules and different appetite for adopting a similar type of legislation or not. But again, as long as we would share the values and the principles around the use of AI, it should be an effort that we make together to then converge on standards, so that, again, on the global stage, when AI would be developed, whether here or in Latin America or in the US or Canada or Japan or South Korea, Australia, whatever, in other parts of the world that, again, understands democracy the way we do, that AI is being developed as much as possible with the same set of standards in mind.